the international community on internal displacement. In this regard, we wish to encourage states to design a clearer system of responsibility for internally displaced persons, to ensure effective protection, to achieve durable solutions, and ultimately to save lives. This should include greater mechanisms of coordination and clearer mandates, including the development of legal instruments and international support founded on the principle that all people, regardless of their migration status, should be able to remain in their home and in peace and security without the threat of being forcibly displaced. In this regard, partnership with religious organizations and faith communities could be particularly helpful, as they are often on the front lines of assisting the forcibly displaced, also providing them with precious psychological and spiritual assistance. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. We shall now turn, this was the last speaker on my list, and we shall turn now to the list of speakers for the national human rights institution and non-governmental organizations, and I give the floor to Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions by a video message.
La Alianza Global de Instituciones Nacionales de Derechos Humanos, GANRI, agradece su informe sobre la situación de las personas sin discapacidad que viven en el desplazamiento interno. Esta población enfrenta formas múltiples e intersectoriales de discriminación basadas en género, edad, origen étnico, religión, afiliación grupal y desplazamiento en sí mismo. La falta de datos precisos sobre la situación de esta población es un desafío importante para garantizar que sus necesidades se aborden como parte de las respuestas frente al desplazamiento forzado. La CNDH podemos desempeñar un papel clave en la prevención del desplazamiento interno, en la protección y atención de los desplazados, incluidas las personas con discapacidad. Por nuestro mandato y capacidad somos los únicos socios para adelantar esta tarea. Señora Relatora Especial, GANRI se complace en cooperar con su mandato para proporcionar, orientar y apoyo a la CNH que trabajan para proteger y promover los derechos de los desplazados internos en todas las regiones. Esto incluye la organización conjunta de las consultas globales e interregionales de la CNH, y así lo demostramos en el seminario web Proteger los desplazados internos en el contexto del COVID-19, el papel y las experiencias de la CNDH y sus oportunidades en colaboración con ACNUR. Agradecemos a la señora relatora por el inquebrantable ejercicio de su mandato y su maravillosa asociación con GANRI. Continuaremos apoyando su exitoso trabajo. Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you very much. Now I'll give the floor to the NGOs, and we start with Sikh Human Rights Group.
Thank you. We are grateful to Special Rapporteur Madame Cecilia Jimenez Damari for the exhaustive report on internal displacement and disabilities. We note the concern that internally displaced persons with intellectual and psychological disabilities are at greatest risk of abuse, violence, and neglect. Autism is often missed in the mental disability spectrum as it is less obvious. Persons with autism have disadvantages in normal life, let alone in difficult situations such as internal displacement. Sikh Human Rights Group affiliate Codewell Children has vast experience in this field. We will be willing to offer expertise to assist with recognition and proactive human rights-based inclusion policy for children with autism in internally displaced persons. We also wish to draw attention of the Special Rapporteur to the plight of Sikhs in Afghanistan. Due to the intolerant and violent policies of several insurgency groups since 1998, the population of Sikhs in Afghanistan has gone down from 200,000 to a mere 100 or so. Others have left. It has affected diversity in the country. Those Sikhs remaining behind have left provincial towns and cities for the safety of a closed area in the capital, Kabul. Even there, the Sikhs suffered horrific terrorist bomb attack on 25th and 26th March 2020. We appreciate the efforts of the government of Afghanistan and understand their helplessness. We will urge the Special Rapporteur to consider these few remaining families from Sikh community as internally displaced so they can be relocated to safer places in the world. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll give the floor to the American for Democracy and Human Rights in Bahrain.
Mr. Vice President, we thank the Special Rapporteur for her report, and we take this opportunity to inform the Council on the number of internally displaced people in Yemen. After more than 5 years of war in Yemen, the number of internally displaced people stands at 4.3 million. To put this in perspective, 4.3 million amounts to half the population of Switzerland. Imagine half the population dwelling in underserviced camps, not knowing where their next meal will come from. What stance would you hold if a coalition of countries launched a war of aggression on Switzerland that caused the displacement of millions of men, women, and children, who then became the target in several instances of unlawful airstrikes by that coalition? Moreover, displaced people are the most vulnerable to the threat of COVID-19, as most of them are in overcrowded camps with substandard healthcare and inadequate access to clean water and other essential services, or the ability to follow social distancing guidelines or self-isolate when sick. Madam Special Rapporteur, what measures would you employ to alleviate the suffering of the 4.3 million internally displaced people in Yemen? With every year that passes without an end to this war, the number of internally displaced people grows, as does the suffering. Madam Special Rapporteur, distinguished members of the Council, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and their Western allies need to hear one strong united message from this Council. Your war crimes in Yemen must stop now. The people of Yemen can't wait.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to the International Organization for Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We welcome the report of the Special Rapporteur on the human rights of internally displaced persons, as for her report on her visit to Iraq, in which she addresses important issues related to the continued plight of IDPs in Iraq. Many IDPs fled conflict zones due to the government's own operations against ISIL. Armed groups, namely the militias, have committed violations against IDPs, including killings and abductions, and to this day are preventing many of them from returning to their homes. Unfortunately, the Iraqi government is based on a sectarian system which is reliant on the militias. Such a system is ill-equipped to resolve any issues, including that of persons displaced on a sectarian basis. We note, however, that this discussion is absent from the report and other UN reports. It must be understood that without profound change of the sectarian system, the Iraqi government will not have the capacity of resolving this complex issue, nor will it have the political will to do so. IFERD and Geneva's International Center for Justice therefore calls on this Council and the Special Rapporteur to recognize this issue and increase its focus on the human rights situation in Iraq, including those of IDPs who have disappeared after being abducted and those who are prevented from returning by the militias. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Al Salam Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, Madam Special Rapporteur. We take this opportunity to inform the Council on the number of internally displaced people in Yemen. After more than 5 years of an unlawful war on Yemen, the number of internally displaced people stands at 813,000 in Hajjah, 700,000 in Sana'a, 692,000 in Hodeidah, 382,000 in Taiz, 324,000 in Sada, 279,000 in Amran, 262,000 in Ib, 238,000 in Damar, 156,000 in Al-Jaf, 140,000 in Aden, 90,000 in Baida, 70,000 in Shabwa, 56,000 in Raima, 40,000 in Mahwit, 30,000 in Hadramat, 27,000 in Marib, and 25,000 in Al-Dalah. That total number of internally displaced people in Yemen has increased to 4.3 million people. The Saudi and UAE-led coalition war in Yemen has resulted in a deep-rooted humanitarian crisis in which war crimes are being committed with arms and intelligence services provided by the US, the UK, and France. Our question is, what stance have you taken or plan to take in response to this crisis, and what measures would you employ to alleviate their suffering? Does your mandate hold the Saudi Arabia-led coalition and its Western supporters accountable for such humanitarian crisis? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll give the floor to the China Society for Human Rights Studies.
Chairman, I'm Wang Jiang from the Chinese Academy of Social Science, and I represent the China Society for Human Rights Studies. In China, the government and the community provides assistance to vulnerable groups such as IDP, fully integrate them into the scope of the social security, and provide social relief management services. After assisting the IDP to return to their hometown, the follow-up assistance and resettlement work will continue to carry out. That is, fundamentally implement measures to ensure that they have stable living security. In addition, China attached great importance to rely on the rule of law to help vulnerable groups. The interim measure for social assistance adopted in 2014 also have positive meanings for improving and the capability for social security in China. With regard to the IDP issue in other countries, we hope that governments will focus on the fundamental causes, developing the economy, building listing pace, and taking comprehensive measures to facing the IDP challenges. In this process, China is supporting relative countries to shake off poverty, improve education and medical care, promote development to respond to this challenge.
Thank you very much. Now I'll give the floor to the Iraqi Development Organization.
Mr. Vice President, Madam Special Rapporteur, we take this opportunity to call the Council's attention to the dire humanitarian and displacement crisis in Yemen. An estimated 3.3 million people have been displaced within Yemen as a result of the conflict since March 2015, after the military intervention of the Saudi Emirati-led coalition. The intense violence and the indiscriminate attacks continue to increase the number of internally displaced persons in Yemen. While IDPs face a wide range of protection needs and vulnerabilities, the instances where camps for internally displaced persons in Yemen have been targeted by the coalition are countless. Just 4 days after the military intervention on March 30, 2015, coalition's fighter jets struck a camp in Ajah, resulting in the death and maiming of over 130 displaced persons. Since then, the unlawful practice has continued unabated and led to the death and injury of thousands, showing the systematic nature of the Saudi targeting over this 5 years brutal war. The full blockade imposed by the Saudi coalition to prevent food, medicine and fuel from entering Yemen has disproportionately affected the most vulnerable, including internally displaced persons. Madam Special Rapporteur, while we understand that ending the war and lifting the blockade would be the most necessary step to alleviate the suffering of the Yemeni people, we are interested in the findings and conclusions you can make regarding the measures taken since 2016 to mitigate the impact of the attacks on the innocent displaced Yemenis. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you very much, and I'll give the floor to Rencontre Africaine. All right, so we move on, and I will give the floor to Institut International pour le Droit de le Développement.
سيد الرئيس، إننا في المعهد الدولي لحقوق والتنمية ومنظمة التضامن لحقوق الإنسان، وإذ نرحب بتقرير المقررة الخاصة المعنية بحقوق الإنسان للنازحين داخليا، نود لفت النظر السيد المقررة إلى أن أوضاع النازحين داخليا في ليبيا قد تفاقمت منذ زيارتها إلى هناك في شهر يناير 2018. لقد أدت المواجهات المسلحة الأخيرة إلى نزوح ما يزيد عن 200,000 من الضواحي الجنوبية للعاصمة طرابلس، ولا يستطيع الغالبية العظمى منهم العودة إلى بيوتهم بسبب الألغام التي زرعتها الميليشيات التابعة لحفتر قبل انسحابها. وقد تسببت النزاعات إلى نزوح ما يقارب عن 80 و20 ألف من مدينتي ترهونة وسرت، والرقم مرشح لزيادة. كما نود لفت عناية السيد المقررة إلى أن أكثر من 200,000 نسمة يعانون من نزوح طويل الأمد، وبالرغم من انتهاء المواجهات المسلحة في مناطقهم التي نزحوا منها مثل مدينتي بنغازي ودرنا، إلى أنهم لا يستطيعون العودة إليها بسبب تهديد مجموعات مسلحة لهم أو مصادرة أملاكهم. سيد الرئيس، ندعو مجلسكم الموقر إلى حث السلطات الليبية على معالجة أوضاع النازحين داخليا من خلال تلبية الاحتياجات الفورية والمتوسطة والطويلة الأجل، وحثها على تنفيذ توصيات السيدة المقررة الخاصة المعنية بحقوق الإنسان للنازحين داخليا التي وردت في تقريرها عن زيارة ليبيا. شكرا.
Shukran. I will give the floor to Bahjat Al-Baqir Charity Foundation. Okay, so International Disability Alliance, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The International Disability Alliance congratulates Ms. Jimenez Damari for her work as Special Rapporteur and praises her active engagement in reporting on the most excluded groups of internally displaced persons, including on persons with disabilities. Her report highlights the precarious situation of around 7 million persons with disability across the globe who are further marginalized in the context of internal displacement. As clearly stated, displaced persons with disabilities experience multiple and intersectional forms of discrimination. stigma, unawareness, and lack of inclusive approach from government agencies and humanitarian actors continue to hinder the access to basic human needs, including shelter, food, healthcare, information, and education for displaced persons with disabilities. In line with the report, we want to stress that for all phases of displacement response and for durable solutions to be inclusive, they must follow the principle and obligation enshrined in the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, including the meaningful engagement of persons with disability through their representative organization. We also encourage the use of the Interagency Standing Committee guidelines on the inclusion of persons with disability in humanitarian action as practical guidance. Finally, we call UN member states to follow the recommendation of this report, to actively involve displaced persons with disability, and to recognize them not as recipients of aid or charity, but as rights holders and agents of change, with valuable expertise for the planning, implementation, and monitoring of displacement responses, for building back better, and to leave no one behind. I thank you.
Thank you very much. This was the last speaker that we could accommodate for this dialogue. I now give the floor back to Ms. Jimenez Damari for her concluding remarks. You have 5 minutes, madam. Oh, you have 2 minutes, sorry. Maybe 2.5 minutes.
Thank you once again for giving me the floor, Mr. Vice President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in the very limited time that we have left, allow me to give my appreciation to those who have taken the floor and express support for my thematic report on IDPs with disabilities and to my mandate. Many themes raised concern the participation of IDPs with disabilities, which continues to be challenging for states and many UN agencies and organizations that provide humanitarian development and peace support. However, in order to ensure the human rights of IDPs with disabilities, we need to change mindset and deliver appropriate resources, policy frameworks, and programmatic responses to ensure the conditions enabling them to genuinely participate, including in relation to accountability. This goes beyond mere consultation and should lead to actual implementation of their human rights with them, and rather than for them. This is relevant for the COVID-19 pandemic even more. The same principles of prevent, protect, and resolve, the slogan of the GP20 Plan of Action, apply in equal measure to IDPs with disabilities. The same thematic approaches are of equal importance. The essentiality of IDP law and policy that enable good governance, the significance of setting up capacity and infrastructure for IDP data and analysis, especially at national level, and lastly, on durable solutions. My mandate remains ready to continue to assist member states in all of these. To conclude, Mr. Vice President, I take this opportunity to thank the many states, including Austria, Honduras, and Uganda, Norway, Iraq, of course, for my official visit early this year, and all the countries I previously visited officially in our continuing constructive dialogues and efforts to achieve successes. Thank you for the welcome I received in many other states and regional organizations. My gratitude goes to the Interagency Standing Committee, the high-level panel, the UN agencies, especially the OHCHR, the UNHCR, and IOM. Likewise, to various UN missions, resident coordinators, and UN country teams, other entities, national human rights institutions, civil society organizations, and last but not the least, donors responsive to the country appeals that I support. And lastly, finally, thank you to all the IDPs who have trusted me with their stories and their dreams. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you very much. This brings us to the end of this interactive dialogue. I wish to thank Ms. Jimenez Damari for her participation today. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we shall now begin the interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary executions. The list of speakers will be closed in 15 minutes. This is my pleasure to welcome to the podium Ms. Agnes Kalamard to present her report in person. Madam, you have the floor. Welcome.
Monsieur le Président, Excellences, représentants des institutions nationales des droits de l'homme et des organisations de défense des droits humains, je souhaite exprimer ma sincère gratitude aux États qui ont coopéré avec mon mandat au cours de l'année passée, tels que, entre autres, le gouvernement du Nigeria pour son assistance durant ma mission et celui du Kenya qui m'a invité à effectuer une visite en novembre de cette année. Ma présentation aujourd'hui porte sur les drones et les assassinats ciblés, thème de mon rapport thématique. Je tiens à noter cependant au moins deux autres thèmes qui ont grandement retenu mon attention au cours de ces dernières semaines. Il s'agit de la protection du droit à la vie dans le contexte de la pandémie Covid-19 et les violences policières dans le cadre de nombreuses manifestations telles que celles liées au mouvement Black Lives Matter ou au mouvement démocratique à Hong Kong. J'appelle à la mise en œuvre de mesures énergiques pour éliminer l'usage disproportionné de la force, particulièrement celui des armes et techniques soi-disant moins meurtrières, et pour éradiquer les profilages et discriminations raciales, ainsi que respecter les attentes démocratiques des peuples. Excellencies, my report on drones' use of force builds on my predecessor's findings and update developments in terms of drones proliferation, the applicable law, mechanisms and institutions for their regulations. My report has an annex presenting a case study of the targeted killing of Iranian General Qassem Soleimani, concluding that his was a violation of the UN Charter governing the use of force and an arbitrary killing. My report highlights challenges that the use of force under drones technology present to human rights protection and for the prevention of crisis, both of which are key responsibilities at the heart of the Human Rights Council's mandate. I wish to highlight here three main concerns. My first one is with the unbounded and uncontrolled proliferation of drones. Excellencies, the world has entered a second drone age in which a vast array of state and non-state actors are deploying ever more advanced drone technology. Many states are eager to join this drone power club. As of 2020, at least 102 countries have an active military drone inventory, and around 40 possess armed drones. 35 are said to possess the largest and deadliest class of drone. And since 2015, at least 11 countries have deployed armed drones for the purpose of targeted killings and use of force. The same applies to non-state actors, with almost a large number of them possessing armed drones and putting them to use. Drones have become speedier, smaller, more lethal, and operable by teams located thousands of kilometers away. Yet, the mere existence of drones does not justify their indiscriminate deployment. However, to date, there are no robust standards governing drones' development, proliferation, export, or capability for use of force. There is no transparency, no effective oversight domestically or internationally, and no accountability for their use. Drone strikes, it seems, are favored by politicians and military alike for their relative efficiency, effectiveness, adaptability, acceptability, deniability, and political gain or lack of political cost. Yet, these apparent benefits are often illusory, as with the myth of a surgical strike. And the absence of effective oversight means it is practically impossible to know whether a person killed in a drone strike was in fact a lawful target under international humanitarian law, at the very least. Moreover, the evidence suggests that the harm to civilian populations, including death, injuries, and trauma, is largely underreported. My second concern is about international legal distortion. In the context of drone usage, a small number of influential states has sought to reinterpret the law of self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter by fostering distortion of applicable law, such as a temporal distortion to the principle that lethal force is permissible only to prevent an imminent attack. That particular principle has now shifted to mean that states feel bound to act before it is too late, with little to no regard as to the actual imminence of a concrete threat. There is also a geographical distortion under which it is argued that against particular non-state groups against whom a state has resorted to force, it is no longer necessary to reassess the imminence requirement in relation to future attack. These can be attacked anywhere. And finally, a distortion of sovereignty, which posits that states are allowed to engage in non-consensual military operation on the territory of another state against armed groups that pose a direct and imminent threat if the host state is quote-unquote unable or unwilling to neutralize the threat that emanates from this armed group. Unable by these legal contortions, low-intensity conflicts are being drawn out with few, if any, geographical or temporal boundaries. Targeted killings until very recently through drones had been limited to non-state actors until for the first time in January 2020, a state armed drone targeted a high-level official of a foreign state and did so on the territory of a third state. This, in my view, highlights the grave risk that these legal contortion or distortion and the expansion of the so-called war on terror doctrine pose to international peace and security. The international community must now confront the very real prospect that states may opt to strategically eliminate high-ranking military officials outside the context of a non-war and seek to justify the killings on the ground of necessity, not imminent. My third concern is with the absence of oversight and with inadequate processes. Such oversight has been hampered by a range of factors. First, the poor quality of reports submitted to the Security Council by states that claim a targeted killing was in self-defense. These Article 51 reports provide little evidence for the alleged imminence of the threat that are said to justify killing as a preemptive self-defense. Second, ineffective processes at the UN means that member states are often not properly informed as a matter of routine that Article 51 reports have been lodged. That leads to a third problem, namely the silence of state. Many states choose to remain legally or politically silent, some through lack of information, others due to fear, self-interest, or under coercion. For instance, even given irrefutable evidence of vast number of strikes on Syria by coalition forces, while several states have reacted, most have remained silent. And it is not just that states that are largely silent, so is the Security Council. From 1945 to 2018, the Security Council responded formally to only about 1/10 of self-defense communication. Under international law, silence should be devoid of legal meaning, and yet silence has often been interpreted to imply endorsement. Excellencies, the international community must take stock of how the use of armed drones has evolved, and they should openly discuss the challenges this now poses to compliance with international human rights law, as well as to peace and security. My recommendations, very briefly, include, with regard to the legal framework, that to be lawful, a drone strike must satisfy specific requirements under all applicable legal regime, that is interstate use of force, IHL and IHRL. And let me remind us all that IHL and IHRL are complementary in armed conflict situation. I'm also
This report is a contribution to the discussion on the use of drones. While armed drones are not illegal weapons and their use in accordance with international law is permitted, extrajudicial executions and arbitrary killings are never acceptable. Accountability for human rights violations and abuses and in violation of international humanitarian law must always be ensured, whoever the perpetrator is. Therefore, the EU calls on all states to ensure accountability when necessary through cooperation with or support of investigative bodies and mechanisms. Impunity can never be an option. Ms. Calamar, are there any examples of good practices that you could share with us in terms of transparency and accountability? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Iceland on behalf of Nordic countries.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I have the honor of delivering this statement on behalf of the Nordic countries, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and my own country, Iceland. Allow me at the outset to thank the Special Rapporteur for her important work and her latest report that contributes to the discussion on the use of drones. While bearing in mind that the armed drones are not illegal weapons and their use is in accordance with international human rights and humanitarian law is permitted, extrajudicial executions and arbitrary killings are never acceptable. Mr. Vice President, the Nordic countries continue to express our deep concern over intentional state killings of human rights defenders, journalists, and dissidents, including those who have sought safety abroad. Extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary executions are abhorrent and represent a violation of the inherent right to life. We reiterate the imperative for accountability for such killings and the need for all investigations to be thorough, credible, transparent, and prompt, and that prosecutions must uphold internationally recognized fair trial and due process norms and standards. Madam Rapporteur, in the face of impunity, it can be difficult for victims' families or others affected to raise their voices over suspected extrajudicial killings. What can the international community do to support these individuals so they can seek justice and accountability at home? I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I now give the floor to the Islamic Republic of Iran. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Vice President, and thank you, Madam Special Rapporteur. General Soleimani, a great Iranian soldier, a true defender of human rights and dignity, was brutally assassinated by the most errant of the earthmen. His assassination was brutal, arbitrary, unjust, and unlawful. It was an international crime of grave nature, threatening international peace and security too. Daesh was the first to rejoice, along with the Israeli regime. What an in the state of Iraq was not only an outrageous violation of international law and the UN Charter, but also of human rights law. The SR has concluded that the targeting of General Soleimani constituted an arbitrary killing for which the US is responsible. She also concluded that the strike was in violation of Article 2.4 of the UN Charter. That conclusion cannot be challenged by any law or logic. There remains no doubt as to the culpability of the US government, as well as those personal criminal responsibility of those involved. The US and the states that hosted the US drones operations bear responsibility and must be held to account for this lawless behavior and criminal act. Notwithstanding the mandate of the Special Rapporteur, arbitrary killing seems to be too light a word to use for such a flagrantly unlawful, viciously immoral, and recklessly dangerous killing. Calling this appalling act of state terrorism, extrajudicial killing, or the like should not be misconstrued as to misjudge the gravity and seriousness of the illegality of the act. The US direct responsibility under international law for this unlawful assassination should not be let eclipsed by distorted facts and false narratives. No fact, law, or logic should be allowed to be abusively invoked to justify this unjust, callous murder. The UN and its human rights mechanisms are expected to urgently sound the alarm over the dire consequences of this blatant infringement of basic tenets of humanity, civility, law, and order. Mr. President, it is hard to imagine that a similar strike against a Western military leader would not be considered an act of war, the Special Rapporteur has asserted. For Iranians, this murder is more than that. General Soleimani symbolized a sovereign state and embodied the soul and spirit of a proud nation determined to resist and thrive. His arbitrary murder injured a whole nation. The manner he was murdered and the character of the killers were all further testaments to the moral justness of his cause. It was only one more instance of the American long list of cruel hostility against the Iranian nation, dating back to 1953 coup, repeated during Saddam's aggressive war, including by providing chemical weapons to that regime, and which continues up to now by inhuman economic terrorism. Mr. President, General Soleimani lived a hero and died a martyr. He is now an inspiring legend and will remain a living nightmare for his killers. You cannot dry up a deeply earthed, pure tree by cutting its branches. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll give the floor to Liechtenstein.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Liechtenstein thanks the Special Rapporteur for the presentation of her report addressing the important issue of targeted killings through armed drones. We understand and fully share the concerns raised by the Special Rapporteur about the absence of a public discussion on ethics, legality, and effectiveness of decapitation strategy at the heart of drones targeted killings. We also have read with particular interest the recommendation by the Special Rapporteur to establish a transparent multilateral process for the development of robust standards in the use of drones, since we see the link between the lawfulness of strike and killings and international human rights law and international humanitarian law. Such a process, in our view, is clearly needed. The development of such standards by a group of like-minded states could be an alternative approach to address the issue and ensure accountability for the misuse of armed drones under the principles and provisions of international law. Mr. Vice President, we would like to ask Ms. Kalamar how she foresees a possible way forward with the establishment of such international standards in the use of drones. To conclude, we would like to reiterate our strong and continued support for the important and still direly needed mandate of the Special Rapporteur. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Russian Federation. Okay. I'll give the floor to Cuba then.
Gracias, señor presidente. Tomamos nota del informe de la relatora sobre ejecuciones extrajudiciales, sumarias o arbitrarias, sobre el novedoso y complejo tema de los asesinatos dirigidos a través del uso de drones armados. Una vez más, lamentamos que los documentos no estén disponibles en los 6 idiomas oficiales y del adendum ni siquiera pudimos disponer en una versión avanzada, lo que dificulta una vez más el análisis de un tema sensible y complejo. Coincidimos con la apreciación de su informe que el uso de estos drones constituye en la actualidad graves violaciones a los propósitos y principios de la Carta de Naciones Unidas, incluidas claras acciones de injerencia, agresión y violaciones flagrantes a la soberanía e integridad territorial de los Estados. Estas acciones son protagonizadas o promovidas por los Estados más poderosos con total impunidad. Sin embargo, no favorecemos el vínculo que hace el informe con mecanismos y órganos ajenos al mandato del Consejo de Derechos Humanos, como la Corte Penal y el Consejo de Seguridad. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to the State of Palestine.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We would also like to thank the Special Rapporteur for her important report. As stated in the report, the right to protection from arbitrary deprivation of life is a rule of customary international law as well as general principle of international law. Israel's systematic and discriminatory use of drones against the Palestinian people targets all aspects of life in violation of international law. Israel's use of drones and its implication on the Palestinian people, ranging from assassinations, targeted killings to tear gas, is well documented. The Commission of Inquiry on Gaza of 2018 noted that gas-carrying drones were heavily used against Palestinian civilians, including children, journalists, and medical personnel, causing fatal injuries and deaths. Yet Israel, occupying power, continues to enjoy the culture of impunity that surrounds these violations. Israel also takes advantage of its illegal occupation of Palestine to field test its weapons, including through carrying out extrajudicial assassinations in contradiction to the principles of international human rights and humanitarian law, and a war crime and crime against humanity. In the face of mounting evidence of atrocities, some governments continue to refer to Israel's so-called right to self-defense. Such statements ignore that Israel is an occupying power and that its arguments of self-defense and other pretexts stand no legal ground in international humanitarian law.
against arbitrary detention, extrajudicial execution, and honor killings are among its key aspects. Mr. Vice President, despite the fact that our government continues to protect the lives of well-being of our citizens, unfortunately, targeted killings have risen sharply in recent weeks against religious leaders, journalists, human rights defenders, healthcare professionals, as well as other public supporters. One such attack is the cowardly assassination of two employees of Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission on 27 of June 2020. We remain committed to bring the perpetrators and their supporters to justice. Madam Special Reporter, thank you for your recommendation in the present report. We share the concern that such irresponsible proliferation of drone technology by many states and private technology companies might end up to the hands of terrorists, insurgents, and drug lords who are already targeting civilians. We remain keen to your expert views.
Thanks a lot. Now I'll give the floor to Venezuela.
Gracias, señor vicepresidente. Agradecemos la presentación realizada. La relatora especial sobre ejecuciones extrajudiciales aborda en su informe la cuestión de los asesinatos selectivos a través de drones armados, particularmente a la luz de la proliferación en el uso de drones y su capacidad de expansión en los últimos 5 años. El 4 de agosto de 2018, el mundo presenció el intento de magnicidio con drones armados con explosivos contra nuestro presidente, Nicolás Maduro Moros, en un desfile militar en Caracas. Esa arremetida terrorista, repudiada por los gobiernos amantes de la paz, presentó un nuevo nivel de sofisticación mediante el uso de 2 drones equipados con cargas explosivas de C4 que tienen la cualidad de ser relativamente furtivos, de alta maniobrabilidad, fácil ocultamiento y traslado. Este fue el primer evento registrado en el mundo de uso de drones comerciales en un intento de asesinato de un jefe de Estado y sirve como precedente para internalizar hasta dónde está dispuesto a llegar el imperio norteamericano y sus acólitos en su guerra contra Venezuela. Señora Presidenta, Venezuela condena igualmente de la manera más rotunda el cobarde asesinato del general Qasem Soleimani de la República Islámica de Irán, también por parte de los Estados Unidos, en enero de este año, mediante el uso de aviones no tripulados, en un atentado que arrastró consigo centenares de vidas más, en grotesca violación del derecho internacional humanitario y los derechos humanos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Tunisia. Move on, we'll give the floor to France.
La France remercie la rapporteure spéciale pour sa présentation et réaffirme son soutien à son mandat et à son renouvellement pour une période de 3 ans. La France s'associe à la déclaration de l'Union européenne. La lutte contre l'impunité des auteurs de violations des droits de l'homme et du droit international humanitaire, dont les exécutions extrajudiciaires, sommaires ou arbitraires, doit rester une priorité afin que les responsables soient traduits en justice et que les victimes puissent obtenir réparation. Dans plusieurs pays, la prévention des exécutions extrajudiciaires et la lutte contre l'impunité des auteurs présumés constituent un aspect fondamental du retour à la paix et à la stabilité. À cet égard, la France souligne que les éliminations ciblées au moyen de drones dans des contextes de conflits armés doivent impérativement être conduites conformément aux dispositions du droit international humanitaire et qu'elles donnent lieu à des enquêtes en cas d'allégations crédibles de pertes et blessés civils ou de dommages causés à des biens civils. La France veille également à ce que les procédures d'emploi des drones soient aussi rigoureuses que celles des autres moyens de guerre utilisés sur les mêmes théâtres d'opération. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Pakistan supports the growing global consensus that drone technologies should be deployed for legitimate security purposes in full compliance with the UN Charter and the international human rights and humanitarian law. We echo the rapporteur's concerns over civilian casualties and collateral damage resulting from drone operations, as well as attempts to distort and misinterpret international law for legitimizing prohibited use of force in the international arena. At the UN, Pakistan has always supported efforts to strengthen and sharpen international legal and normative framework on the use of armed drones. In 2014, we sponsored HRC Resolution 2512 that calls on states to comply with international law when using remotely piloted aircrafts, ensure transparency, and conduct independent and impartial investigations whenever there's an indication of violation of international law. This landmark resolution provides a concrete baseline for further elaborating legal clarity about the use of drone in complex situations. We emphasize that in the broader context, the international community needs to reorient its outlook, effectively utilize the variety of options available for pacific settlement of disputes under Chapter 6 of the UN Charter, and invest in peace more than in war. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor now to Namibia. We move on. I'll give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Australia thanks the Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, summary or arbitrary executions for her work over the past 4 years. Protection of the right to life is a core human rights priority for Australia. Australia strongly condemns violations of this right. Sadly, ongoing extrajudicial, summary and arbitrary executions in many places around the world demonstrate the need for continuing this mandate. In Australia's view, the existing international humanitarian law framework effectively governs the use of force during armed conflict. Application of and compliance with this framework in times of armed conflict must be a priority. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Syria.
شكرا سيد نائب الرئيس. إن تصاعد لجوء الولايات المتحدة وإسرائيل وتركيا للاستخدام المفرط للطائرات من دون طيار في ممارسة العدوان العسكري وإرهاب الدولة خارج حدودها يرتبط بصمت مجلس الأمن عن ردع هذه الأعمال التي تهدد السلم والأمن الدوليين وتنتهك قواعد القانون الدولي وميثاق الأمم المتحدة. إن التفسيرات التي تسوقها هذه الدول لتبرير جرائمها سواء بذريعة مكافحة الإرهاب أو بذريعة المادة 51 من الميثاق هي هرطقات قانونية تتعارض مع مبادئ احترام سيادة الدول وحظر استخدام القوة في العلاقات الدولية، ويتوجب الحذر من محاولة شرعنتها. إن ما أورده تقرير المقرر الخاص حول حصول تنظيمات إرهابية ترتبط بداعش وجبهة النصرة على تكنولوجيات الطائرات المسيرة واستخدامها في سوريا هو دليل على مستوى الدعم الذي تحصل عليه هذه التنظيمات في انتهاك للمادة 2.4 من الميثاق التي تحظر على الدول تقديم الدعم لعصابات مسلحة ترتكب أعمالا إرهابية. ختاما إن اغتيال اللواء قاسم سليماني صاحب الدور المشهود في مكافحة الإرهاب بطائرة أمريكية مسيرة هو جريمة إرهاب دولة تتجاوز في خطورتها مجرد توصيفها كعملية قتل مستهدف أو محاولة تبريرها بذرائع لا تستند لأي أساس قانوني. شكرا سيد الرئيس.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente. Agradecemos a la relatora especial por la presentación de su informe, el cual examina los asesinatos selectivos cometidos por drones armados. Desde 2010, sus predecesoras advirtieron sobre los peligros de la proliferación de estas tecnologías. Hoy nos encontramos en una nueva era de drones más sofisticados, con una amplia gama de actores estatales y no estatales que disponen de ellos, lo que plantea desafíos fundamentales para la protección del derecho a la vida en los conflictos, la guerra asimétrica, la lucha contra el terrorismo y las situaciones de paz. Preocupa que la gran mayoría de los asesinatos selectivos cometidos por drones escapan del escrutinio internacional y la rendición de cuentas mediante interpretaciones permisivas del marco jurídico existente. Además, han contribuido a reforzar los estereotipos de masculinidad violenta. El status quo es inaceptable. El derecho a la protección contra la privación arbitraria de la vida es una norma del derecho internacional consuetudinario, así como un principio general del derecho internacional y una norma de jus cogens. Los Estados deben cumplir las limitaciones impuestas por el derecho internacional sobre el uso de la fuerza, incluyendo la Carta de las Naciones Unidas, el Derecho Internacional de los Derechos Humanos y el DIH. Hemos leído atentamente sus recomendaciones, en particular las contenidas en los párrafos 89, 90 y 91b, y deseamos preguntar a la relatora especial cómo el Consejo de Derechos Humanos podría coadyuvar al establecimiento de un proceso multilateral para el desarrollo de una normativa sobre drones y la presentación de informes anuales sobre esta temática por la Oficina de la Alta Comisionada. Muchas gracias.
Gracias. I'll give the floor now to Iraq.
شكرا سيد نائب الرئيس. تجدون بيان العراق كاملا منشورا على الإكسترانت.
اطلع وفد بلدي على تقرير مقررة خاصة موضوع النقاش رغم تأخر نشره والمدة القصيرة الممنوحة للتشاور بشأنه مع الدول المعنية، ويود بيان ما يلي. أولا، يعيد العراق تأكيدي على أهمية أن يمنح أصحاب الولايات الوقت الكافي للدول للرد على استفساراتهم. ثانيا، تشكلت قوات التحالف الدولي لمحاربة عصابات داعش الإرهابية بناء على طلب العراق في رسالتين حددتا مهام التحالف وأكدتا سيادة العراق. ثالثا، قدم العراق شكوى إلى الجمعية العامة ومجلس الأمن بشأن الهجمات الأمريكية واغتيال قادة عسكريين عراقيين وأصدقاء رفيعي المستوى من دولة مجاورة، والتي أسفرت عن استشهاد نائب رئيس هيئة الحشد الشعبي العراقي الذي هو أحد تشكيلات القوات العراقية ورفاقه في انتهاك خطير للسيادة العراقية ولشروط تواجد القوات الأمريكية في العراق، عادا ذلك عدوانا على دولة مستقلة ذات سيادة. رابعا، عبر العراق عن إدانته واحتجاجه لقيام الجمهورية الإسلامية الإيرانية بقصف معسكرات داخل الأراضي العراقية، عادا ذلك خرقا للسيادة العراقية ومشددا على عدم سماحه لجعل أراضيه ساحة للصراعات. خامسا، عرفت الجمعية العامة للأمم المتحدة العدوان في قرارها 3314 وذكرت في مادته باء أن قصف قوات مسلحة ما إقليم دولة أخرى يعد عدوانا على تلك الدولة. ختاما، يضع العراق هذه الحقائق أمام المقررة الخاصة ويود سماع رأيها ضمن إطار ولايتها. وشكرا السيد نائب الرئيس.
Thank you very much. Now I will invite Ms. Kalamar to respond to this question and comments that made at this stage, and then we'll move on. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, and thank you very much to Member States for your questions and comments. I will not answer each country, so please accept my apologies because there will be too many. I'm going to make general comments which I hope will answer your queries. The first one is that I think we've heard a number of examples that point to the uncontrollable proliferation and use of armed drones, including by armed groups. I think that, I want to reiterate this point that at the moment, yes, it is not an unlawful weapon, but the fact that it is completely or almost completely unregulated domestically largely, because it falls or it is considered as a counter-terrorist tool and weapon rather than a military weapon, and the fact that there are no international standards on that particular weapon means that it is spreading exponentially, including in the hands of armed groups. There were many examples in Iraq in particular of Daesh using quite sophisticated drones to counter actions by Iraq and the coalition forces. And it's only one example. So please be aware of this. Yes, there is a market for drones at the moment. A number of governments are trying to control or to take precedent over this market. But if we do not control this market, we will become the victims of this particular weapon. And there is no doubt that this is already happening. Second, a number of you have made reference to the respect for IHL, the respect for the Geneva Convention and humanitarian law. I am fully in agreement with this, but I want to insist on the fact that the vast majority of use of drones at the moment that have been the object of proper investigation, including in the context of Iraq for the January strike, do not take place in recognized armed conflict. So you cannot make any claims under IHL if IHL does not apply. You cannot suggest that IHL is the only guiding force for the use of drones when drones are being used in context where there is no recognized or recognizable armed conflict. I have elaborated at great length on that point in the case study because I do not believe that at the time of the strike against General Soleimani, there was a recognized armed conflict between the US and Iran taking place in the territory of Iraq. You know, these are leading us to complete legal creation, and that's dangerous. So please keep in mind that IHL is often not the guiding force to assess the legality of a strike, and in fact, we must be referring back to international human rights law. I have been asked about good practice. There are not a lot, unfortunately, related to the control domestically or internationally. Very few parliaments around the world are prepared to provide an oversight over the development and the use of that particular weapon for a range of reasons. So I do not have a good practice. What I do have at the moment is some interesting jurisprudence, particularly the last one I am aware of is in Germany, where there a German court has insisted that actually the court and the law have a say over the use and the multiplication of the use of the German territory for the purpose of drone strikes. They've also insisted, as a domestic court, that there was no basis in international law or domestic law for the notion of a preemptive strike with imminence, the notion of imminence being provided with an elastic definition. A third issue that has been raised is with regard to how do we control. So in the best scenario, the General Assembly, for instance, or the Security Council should give a UN mandate to the development of standards regarding that particular weapon. This has been done with other weapons. So far, it has not been done with drones. I should point out that my report comes in the wake of a number of warnings by the UN itself, UNIDIR, the UN Secretary General, and those in charge of disarmament. So the best scenario will be for a UN mandate as part of the development of standards regarding that particular weapon. Failing that, what I have suggested, which has been picked up by Liechtenstein, is that like-minded states should come together, set up an expert group made up of states, made up of academics, made up of military experts, made up of members of civil society that will produce standards for the purpose of every member state's review and possibly adoption domestically and maybe regionally and internationally. So I think we need to, of course, go for the best option, but I suspect that it will not be easy. And therefore, we cannot leave the space empty of standard setting. And I want to invite you all to come together, those that believe that the development and this proliferation of drones is dangerous for global peace, to come together, set up that group, and provide those standards. This has been done before for other issues, and I think there are models to follow. The Human Rights Council itself could play a role in that process. They could at least note that possibility, encourage that development. They could encourage or demand of the OHCHR that it contributes to the development of standards. It could also ask the OHCHR to report annually on the use of drones and drones casualties, because unfortunately at this point, transparency is not the modus operandi. A number of you have pointed to the procedural, the importance of investigation. Most use of drones are not the object of any kind of investigation. So for the OHCHR to fill that gap will be a tremendous contribution. I think, you know, I have dealt with most of the issues that are related to to drones. There were a number of other issues related to massive killings, including in Libya, the existence of mass graves, the targeting of human rights defenders in Afghanistan that I am fully aware of. As a special rapporteur, I welcome your input, your feedback, your communication on those cases. I know we have taken, taken very seriously, most recently, the targeted killing of defenders in Afghanistan, and we continue to monitor the situation in Libya as we do with a range of other countries, such as Burkina Faso, for instance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We shall now return to the list of speakers, and I'll give the floor to Nigeria. You have the floor.
Madam President, Nigeria takes note of the report and commend the efforts of the Special Rapporteur. We reiterate Nigeria's strong condemnation of all forms of extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary executions. At the instance of the Special Rapporteur, Nigeria submitted clarifications on the alleged use of armed drones by its military in the ongoing counter-terrorism operations. Unfortunately, such clarifications were not reflected in the Special Rapporteur's report. To set the record straight, the allegation that Nigeria uses armed drones for targeted attacks is not based on verifiable facts and therefore highly speculative, as Nigeria neither possesses or deploys armed drones whatsoever in the fight against Boko Haram terrorists or insurgents. The Nigeria Ministry of Defense, as the lead agency in the fight against Boko Haram terrorists or insurgents, is conscious of its role as enshrined in the Nigerian Constitution and other extant laws. The ministry also observes the rule of engagement, the principle of international humanitarian law, and international human rights laws in its operations. Finally, Nigeria attaches great importance to the sanctity of human life, and we continue to adopt measures to ensure the promotion and protection of human rights, particularly the right to life in all circumstances. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The United Kingdom thanks the Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, summary or arbitrary executions for her important work. Madam Special Rapporteur, we note your most recent report addressing the issue of targeted killings through armed drones. You have made a useful contribution to an important debate. We would note that the UK has extensive processes to ensure that its use of drone technologies will always comply with the applicable law. The UK government strongly condemns any instances of extrajudicial, summary or arbitrary executions. Extrajudicial killings are a clear violation of human rights, the impact of which deeply affects the families and communities of victims, as well as undermining the rule of law. We cannot allow these practices to continue unchecked. The UK works with the leading local and regional civil society to tackle these issues and engages bilaterally to promote awareness through our diplomatic network, raising individual cases where appropriate. We also work through the multilateral system to address these crimes, highlighting concerns and working with others to end these abhorrent practices. To this end, the UK introduced a global human rights sanction regime on Monday, focused on imposing sanctions pertaining to violations or abuses of the right to life and right not to be subjected to torture or cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. Madam Special Rapporteur, what more can states do to bring justice to victims' families and to protect their citizens' human rights? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to the Netherlands.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Kingdom of the Netherlands aligns itself with the EU. We applaud the Special Rapporteur for her tireless work to end extrajudicial, summary and arbitrary executions and to address their broader human rights consequences. Thank you for your report. Summary executions also still silence human rights defenders and journalists. Anyone should be safe to report on alleged human rights violations without having to fear for his or her life. We are shocked by the recent targeted killing of Mrs. Fatima Khalil and Javid Folat of the Independent Human Rights Commission in Afghanistan. We express our deepest condolences for their families. A recent NGO report shows the devastating rise and scale of abuse and unlawful deaths in unofficial detention centers in Yemen and its deep impact on society. We reiterate our call to all parties to the conflict in Yemen to end the rampant violations and killings, respect human rights and end impunity. Madam Special Rapporteur, what is the status of the recommendations of your report into the killing of Jamal Khashoggi? In particular, how can we assist you in your intention to undertake a comprehensive review of laws and best practices? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to South Sudan.
Thank you, Vice President. South Sudan shares the Council's concern with the act of summary execution around the world. We noted and appreciate the report made by the Special Rapporteur. The government of the Republic of South Sudan reiterates its fully commitment to uphold the Constitution and the National Security Services Act, which provides protection to all people regardless of their different political affiliation and opinions, and which does not engage in assassination of political dissidents because it is not the culture or any policy of the Republic of South Sudan. In the light of the military confirmation before the signing of the peace agreement in 2018, there were incidents of political dissidents where some of them were captured by the government of the Republic of South Sudan on crimes against the state and were put into the court of law. Those people were eventually given jail sentences, including those who committed crimes. In the same year, they were pardoned by the head of the state before completing their jail terms. This act affirmed the commitment of the government of the Republic of South Sudan to uphold the Constitution, which does not condemn summary execution of the people. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll give the floor to Turkey.
Mr. Vice President, we have noted the Special Rapporteur Kalamar's report on the issue of targeted killings through armed drones. At the outset, let me emphasize that though facing unprecedented challenges to its security due to multifaceted threats from several terrorist organizations, Turkey is abiding by universal values such as human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. In Madam Kalamar's report, there are references to PKK terrorist organization merely as if it is an innocent political party without emphasizing its terrorist character. We reject such a reference to PKK terror organization, which has been raging a brutal terror campaign against Turkey since 1984 and has claimed over 41,000 innocent lives. We think that such references to terror groups will create danger of glorifying them and giving legitimacy to their terror propaganda by the international organizations. Moreover, it is also worth emphasizing that the PKK is designated as a terrorist organization not only by Turkey, but also the EU and the US at all. Despite our multiple initiatives, the Special Rapporteur fails to mention in her report the significant fact. On the other hand, regarding the unwilling and unable doctrine mentioned in the report, we would like to emphasize that Turkey defines its actions against the PKK, YPG, and Daesh terrorist organizations in her neighboring territories as an exercise of the right to self-defense in accordance with Article 51 of the UN Charter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll give the floor to Uruguay.
Gracias, señor vicepresidente. Uruguay reitera su más firme condena a todo tipo de ejecuciones arbitrarias y extrajudiciales. Damos la bienvenida al informe presentado sobre los drones utilizados para perpetrar asesinatos selectivos y manifestamos nuestra profunda preocupación ante la proliferación de su uso y la falta de regulaciones suficientes, lo cual, como lo ha señalado la relatora, trae consigo nuevos desafíos para el derecho internacional a los que la comunidad internacional debe responder. Nos preocupan en particular las lagunas existentes y que la gran mayoría de los asesinatos cometidos a través de drones no están sujetos a investigación alguna. Uruguay reafirma su condición de país pacifista y reitera su rechazo a todo uso de la fuerza contrario a la Carta de las Naciones Unidas, incluyendo el cometido mediante el uso de drones. Al mismo tiempo, recordamos la vigencia de las obligaciones derivadas del derecho internacional de los derechos humanos y del derecho humanitario aplicables a todas las partes en un conflicto, independientemente del sistema de armas utilizado. Alentamos a todos los países, inclusive aquellos que exportan drones militares, a mostrar su voluntad política para avanzar en la regulación de su uso bajo un enfoque de derechos humanos que permita proporcionar mayores garantías de justicia y reparación para las víctimas, así como identificar responsabilidades ante las consecuencias nocivas generadas por su uso. Manifestamos nuestro más pleno apoyo a la renovación de este mandato. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Switzerland.
Monsieur le Vice-président, la Suisse remercie la rapporteuse spéciale pour son rapport. Nous examinerons plus en profondeur les questions fondamentales posées par ce dernier. La Suisse appelle les acteurs concernés à assurer que l'usage des technologies émergentes comme les drones respecte à tout moment les droits de l'homme et le droit international humanitaire lorsque ce dernier s'applique. Elle réaffirme l'obligation de tous les États de mener des enquêtes exhaustives et impartiales sur tous les cas présumés d'exécution extrajudiciaire, sommaire ou arbitraire. Elle condamne toutes les morts illégales résultant de l'utilisation de drones armés. De plus, la Suisse souligne l'importance d'une application rigoureuse des réglementations existantes en matière de contrôle des exportations afin de limiter les défis liés à la prolifération des drones armés conventionnels. Elle adhère au régime d'exportation et de contrôle des armements pertinents, tels que le traité sur le commerce des armes, le régime de contrôle de la technologie des missiles ou encore l'arrangement de Wassenaar. Elle applique aussi des critères clairs pour contrôler l'exportation de drones et de technologies relatives à double usage. Madame la rapporteure spéciale, quels sont, à votre avis, les plus grands défis pour assurer la reddition de comptes en lien avec les morts illégales résultant de l'usage de drones armés? Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to China.
副主席先生，当前世界范围内法外处决现象仍然存在，中方高度关注伊朗伊斯兰革命卫队指挥官苏莱曼尼遇害事件，一贯反对国际关系中使用武力，主张各方应切实遵守联合国宪章宗旨和原则以及国际关系基本准则。中方对卡拉马女士在涉港问题上采用虚假信息、超越自身授权、发表错误言论，对中国正当国家安全立法行为进行无端指责，表示严重关切。这为反华乱港势力和暴徒撑腰打气，严重违反联合国宪章宗旨和原则，中方坚决反对。谢谢副主席先生。
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Lebanon. Now we shall turn to the list of speakers for non-governmental organizations, and I'll give the floor to Law Council of Australia.
Representing farmers, the Indigenous, political activists and alleged drug offenders find themselves red-tagged or put on drug lists, increasing their risk of being killed. This runs counter to the rule of law, including the presumption of innocence and right to a fair trial. The obligation of the Philippines to protect the right to life includes duties to implement a proper legal framework to prevent the arbitrary deprivation of life, respond to reasonably foreseeable threats to life, and investigate and ensure accountability for arbitrary killing wherever it occurs. We urge the government of the Philippines to take immediate, meaningful steps to ensure lawyers and judges can do their jobs safely and independently and protect them against killings, reprisals, threats and intimidation. End practices of red tagging and drug lists, and uphold the guarantee of non-identification in the UN basic.
Thank you very much. I think so. I'll give the floor to CELS. You have the floor.
Gracias, señora presidenta. El CELS, la Asociación Pro Derechos Humanos Bolivia, la Red Andina de Información y el CETIM recuerdan que más de 7 meses pasaron desde la forzada renuncia de Evo Morales y las masacres de Sacaba y Sencata en Bolivia. Yanine Áñez, apoyada por las Fuerzas Armadas y la policía, tomó el poder y mediante el Decreto Supremo 4078 eximió de responsabilidades a las Fuerzas Armadas por el ejercicio de la violencia, dando lugar a 27 personas asesinadas, de los cuales 100% de ellas fallecieron con disparos en sus órganos vitales. En Sacaba se evidencia de que los disparos fueron con balas de calibre militar. Sin embargo, no fueron considerados como pruebas balísticas oficiales, por lo que hasta el día de hoy no hay ninguna persona identificada con probabilidad de autoría. En Sencata pasaron 6 meses de etapa de investigación previstos en la normativa penal y el Ministerio Público no arrojó ningún resultado para establecer la verdad histórica de los hechos. Las promesas de apoyo humanitario a las víctimas por parte de las autoridades de gobierno hasta la fecha no se concretaron, por lo que las víctimas se encuentran en total desamparo e impunidad. Ante la ausencia de legitimidad estatal, acudimos a este Consejo y a esta Relatoría para pedir prioridad para la situación de Bolivia en función de los comicios electorales del 6 de septiembre y las vulneraciones persistentes en los derechos humanos en estos 7 meses. Gracias.
Thank you very much, and I'll give the floor to Human Rights Watch.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Human Rights Watch welcomes the report of the Special Rapporteur and the recommendation to adopt a strong political declaration on strengthening protection of civilians from the harm arising from use of explosive weapons in populated areas. The declaration should commit countries to avoid using explosive weapons with wide area effects in such circumstances and comprehensively address the humanitarian impact. Special Rapporteur, it's been 1 year since your report on the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Following a trial concluded in December, you commented that those who ordered the executions have barely been touched by the investigation, and at no point did the trial consider the responsibilities of the state. Moreover, the climate of impunity and intolerance for dissent remains in Saudi Arabia, leaving women, defenders, journalists, and others at continued risk. What should the Council do to bring more systematic scrutiny to the rights situation in the country? We're also extremely concerned about the rapidly deteriorating human rights situation in Burkina Faso, including alleged unlawful killings by armed Islamist groups, security forces, and pro-government militias. These violations have provoked widespread displacement and deepened ethnic tension. Since 2017, we've documented the killing of 407 civilians by armed Islamist groups. We've also documented the alleged killing of over 500 suspects by security forces, the vast majority found dead after having last been seen in government custody, further driving recruitment into armed Islamist groups. Self-defense groups institutionalized by the government also stand accused of numerous violations, including the killing of at least 43 men in March. We urge the Council to address this serious situation. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Conectas.
Thank you, Madam President. This statement is in partnership with Redes da Maré and Justiça Global. We thank the Special Rapporteur for her report. Law enforcement measures should always be guided by the principles of legality, necessity, proportion, precaution, and non-discrimination. In Rio de Janeiro, between January and May 2020, 741 people were killed by the police. 75% of those were people of African descent, reaffirming structural racism. In the Maré complex, 20 police operations were recorded in the same period, resulting in 3 days of suspended classes and 4 people were murdered. Brazil's Supreme Court recently suspended police operations in the state of Rio de Janeiro during the pandemic, except in particular situations due to the increasing lethality, such as the one that resulted in the death of João Pedro, a 14-year-old child inside his residence illegally invaded by police officers. Notwithstanding, the Public Prosecutor's Office has been ineffective in the inspection, investigation, and accountability of illegal acts by the police, while Rio's government acts to resume routine operations. Public security is a right for all Brazilians. We urge the international community to closely monitor police violence and structural racism in Brazil. We call on the control bodies of the justice system to investigate violent deaths committed by state agents. We urge the authorities to build a homicide reduction plan and protocols for the use of lethal force. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll give the floor to Commission Mexicana.
Agradecemos el informe de la relatora de ejecuciones extrajudiciales y nos preocupa, al igual que a usted, la proliferación y el uso de una nueva generación de sistemas armamentísticos. En países como México, desde que inició la denominada guerra contra las drogas en 2006, el gasto militar sigue en aumento. Tan solo en los últimos 9 años ha aumentado un 47% el presupuesto destinado al Ejército y la Marina. La violencia armada y los enfrentamientos entre organizaciones criminales y las fuerzas de seguridad en México ha alcanzado un nivel intolerable. El total de homicidios violentos que se ha registrado de 2006 a 2019 es de más de 276,000. Nos preocupa que pese al uso indebido de la fuerza, las ejecuciones arbitrarias de civiles, la alteración y ocultamiento de pruebas por parte de Fuerzas Armadas, el presidente de México publicara un acuerdo para facultar a estas fuerzas en tareas de seguridad pública e investigación sin mecanismos de supervisión civil. Desde que se creó la Guardia Nacional, institución integrada principalmente por militares, ya existen 49 quejas en la Comisión Nacional de Derechos Humanos en su contra. Y tan solo durante los primeros 4 meses de 2020 hemos registrado 405 civiles y 23 miembros de las Fuerzas Armadas fallecidos en enfrentamientos. Esto es, 18 civiles muertos por cada efectivo militar. Señora relatora, el Estado mexicano ha fallado en proteger el derecho a la vida. Por ello, le solicitamos inste a este Consejo de Derechos Humanos a establecer un mecanismo independiente e imparcial que investigue las violaciones a derechos humanos que se cometen en México por parte de las Fuerzas Armadas.
Thank you very much, and I'll give the floor to World Organization Against Torture. You have the floor.
Monsieur le Président, l'Organisation mondiale contre la torture et ses partenaires au Cameroun et au Burkina Faso souhaitent attirer l'attention du rapporteur spécial sur la recrudescence des cas d'exécution sommaire dans ces deux pays au cours des derniers mois. En effet, sous couvert de lutte contre le terrorisme, les forces de sécurité du Cameroun et du Burkina Faso ont à plusieurs reprises interpellé, détenu, torturé et exécuté des dizaines de civils soupçonnés d'appartenir ou de collaborer avec des groupes armés non étatiques. Au Burkina Faso, nos organisations ont documenté l'exécution extrajudiciaire de plusieurs civils lors d'une opération de lutte antiterroriste, dont environ 180 dans la ville de Djibo, contribuant ainsi à la stigmatisation de la communauté Peul, qui représente de manière discriminatoire une cible dans la lutte contre le terrorisme. De même, au Cameroun, les confrontations armées entre les forces de sécurité et les groupes armés non étatiques ont eu pour conséquence des exécutions sommaires par les deux camps. 13 civils anglophones, dont des enfants, ont été exécutés en février dernier. Dans ces deux pays, bien que des enquêtes aient été officiellement annoncées ou diligentées, des procès et des sanctions judiciaires contre les auteurs et leurs supérieurs n'ont toujours pas eu lieu, faisant ainsi penser à une politique délibérée d'impunité. Monsieur le Président, nos organisations invitent les autorités du Cameroun et du Burkina Faso à prendre toutes les mesures nécessaires pour protéger les droits de l'homme dans la lutte contre le terrorisme, éviter la stigmatisation de communautés spécifiques et organiser des procès publics contre les auteurs et commanditaires d'exécutions sommaires. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Lawyers' Rights Watch Canada.
Madam President, Lawyers' Rights Watch Canada thanks the Special Rapporteur for her reports and statements over the past year. All extrajudicial killings are abhorrent violations of the right to life. Impunity for extrajudicial killings of lawyers and judges additionally undermines the rule of law by impairing access to legal representation and remedies for rights violations. The lack of independent, impartial, and effective investigations and prosecutions in cases of extrajudicial killings is evident in too many states. In Myanmar, one suspect in the 2017 murder of lawyer U Ko Ni remains at large. In South Sudan, the murder of lawyer Dong Samuel Luak remains uninvestigated. The Philippines continues its pattern of impunity for extrajudicial killings, despite Council Resolution 41L20. 59 lawyers, judges, and legal workers are among the thousands murdered with impunity in the Philippines since 2016. We join the Special Rapporteur in the statement of 31 Special Procedures mandate holders on 25 June 2020, urging establishment of an on-the-ground international independent investigation into the human rights situation in the Philippines, together with the strengthening of the OHCHR mandate for reporting on violations in the Philippines. We also ask the Council to urge the Philippines, as a member of Council, to fulfill its obligations to cooperate with the Council pursuant to GA Resolution 6251. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Edmund Rice International Limited. You have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Edmund Rice International would like to draw the Council's attention to the inordinate delay in delivering justice to the victims of extrajudicial executions in Manipur, India. On the 4th of July 2018, the UN Special Rapporteur on Summary, Arbitrary and Extrajudicial Executions expressed her extreme concern at the delay in the investigations by the Central Bureau of Investigations into the 1,528 cases of extrajudicial killings placed before the Supreme Court in a public interest litigation filed by the Extrajudicial Execution Victim Families Association, Manipur, and Human Rights Alert. The rapporteur condemned the lack of progress and observed that, quote, the delay appears to be deliberate, undue and unreasonable, unquote. We would like to inform the Council that the last hearing of this case in the Supreme Court of India was in September 2018. The Court has neither constituted a new bench nor listed it for hearing after the retirement of the senior judge. This is despite the petitioner's repeated mention of the matter before the Chief Justice in the open court. The glimmer of hope that the Supreme Court had once provided to thousands of widows and orphans awaiting justice appears to be drying up. We strongly urge this Council and the Special Rapporteur to remind the Government of India of its obligation under international human rights law to conduct prompt, thorough, impartial and independent investigations into all allegations of extrajudicial killings. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you very much. And I'll give the floor to internationallawyers.org.
President of the Council, distinguished members, we would like to thank the Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial, Summary, or Arbitrary Executions for her report, and we urge the international community to openly engage in a public discussion about the ethics, legality, and effectiveness of what the Special Rapporteur describes as the, quote, decapitation strategy at the heart of drone-targeted killings, and about the measures of success of a long-term vision for the sustainable protection of human lives and global peace. As the report discusses, the use of armed drones by a vast array of state and non-state actors has increased since 2015. Drones are widely used, including for the purpose of the use of force, and including for the use of targeted killings. Besides the use by states, we are also seeing the use of drones by Iraqi and Houthi militias, as well as by ISIS.
Thank you.
InternationalLawyers.org and Geneva International Center for Justice support the Special Rapporteur's call for international scrutiny and oversight over the use of drones, particularly when they are used in targeted killings, resulting in an arbitrary deprivation of life. We also call on UN member states to respond publicly to cases of preemptive self-defense, including those where drones are used and which violate international law. We urge the UN, as well as its independent member states, to use all its efforts to enforce international law with respect to the use of drones by both state and non-state actors, including militias, and to work to restore the rule of law and compliance with fundamental human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'll give the floor to Union of Northwest Human Rights Organization.
Honorable Vice President, Excellencies, the extrajudicial killings taking place in Pakistani-occupied Azad Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan are not acceptable. The citizens of Azad Kashmir stand before you today seeking intervention on the repression and extrajudicial killings of our people. Azad means free, but this is a false label that has been attached to our people to hide the truth in a disgusting way. In fact, any dissent towards Pakistan is mercilessly crushed through land officers, army atrocities, and the ISI. Today, even the Prime Minister of Azad Kashmir is speaking out against the Pakistani establishment for forcing constitutional changes through the 14th Amendment in Act 74 down our throats in the name of Islam and brotherhood. According to the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, ISI carries out extensive surveillance operations on the press and pro-independence groups. They have carried out arbitrary arrests in which people have been tortured and several have died. Madam Special Rapporteur, let me say all presumed accidents are extrajudicial killings. Hafiz Wasim Nasser was killed in a store just yesterday, yet another arbitrary killing by the government servant. I request this August Council that the Pakistani government be put on notice on specific cases of extrajudicial killings and summary executions.
Thank you very much. Now, I was told that the Law Council of Australia, the video that we saw, it was partly. And now I think we will give the floor back to the Law Council of Australia to have the full video.
Representing farmers, the Indigenous,
So shall we try it one more time? Or? So if this is not the case, I will invite Ms. Agnes Calamari to respond to the questions and the comments which was made. And I'm afraid that you have only 1 minute.
That's it. All right. Thank you very much for all the comments. I will stick largely to the question of drones and to the good practice and what can be done. I highlight in my report the existence of evaluations after drone strikes, which have allowed for a clear decrease in the number of collateral killings. And I will invite all member states using drones to please refer to the specific paragraph in my report and the sources. I want to also mention a couple of opportunities to strengthen human rights protection that include the protection of civilian strategy of the Secretary General, as well as the development at the moment of a political declaration regarding the protection of people and the use of explosive weapons. All of those are very important strategies. With regard to the specific country questions, I can talk to the governments. For Nigeria, I just want to mention the fact that my source was an official source from the Ministry of Defense, which is why I've left it in the report. I also want to explain that I do not take I know Turkey had a problem with me because I didn't use the word terrorism as associated to PKK. It's not specific to PKK. I never use the word terrorism, or very rarely do I refer to the concept of terrorism or terrorist group in my report, because I do not believe that there is sufficient international legal grounds for their definition. But I refer to them as armed groups, and when and if they violate international law, I do state so. With regard to China, I'm sorry that you consider that my position on the use of force against the protesters is out of my mandate. I have followed exactly the same approach and the same benchmark for the protesters in the context of the Black Lives Matter demonstration in the US. I'm applying the same international human rights law standard to the protest in Hong Kong, and this is the beauty of international human rights law. It does not act and change on the basis of the identity of the people. It is a universal standard. Finally, very quickly, Jamal Khashoggi, what can governments do? I am calling again on governments to please consider the creation of an international independent investigatory mechanisms, including for the killing of human rights defenders. Throughout this interactive dialogue, many countries, many governments have pointed to the arbitrary killings of human rights defenders. I believe that there is a gap within the international mechanism at the moment, and I'm again suggesting that we could build on the IIIM mechanisms and expand the mandate to include the targeted killings by armed groups or indeed by state of human rights defenders and journalists. And with regard to strengthening accountability with specific reference to Saudi Arabia, I think the forthcoming G20 event should give us a great number of opportunities to demand of Saudi Arabia that it takes the necessary steps to demonstrate that it can hold that meeting, including by releasing prisoners of conscience, women human rights defenders that are currently in prison for demanding the right to drive. And I already have spoken at length about accountability for the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, so I'm not going to repeat where I am on that front. I do believe that far more need and must be done, including by the international community, through the process of universal jurisdictions, and I welcome what's happening right now in Turkey with this trial in absentia. A number of other countries have been mentioned, Burkina Faso, Sahel, Philippines. I thank you all for your contribution. Those countries are all on my agenda. You have in fact referred to writings and letters and communications I have done. I will continue to do so, and I welcome your input and insight so that we can better protect the right to life and the right not to be arbitrarily deprived of one's life. Thank you very much. Thank you to the state and to NGOs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And this brings us to the end of this interactive dialogue, and I wish to thank Ms. Kalamar for her participation today. Thank you very much, Madam. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we shall now begin the interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on the rights to freedom of peaceful assembly and of association. The list of speakers will be closed in 15 minutes. Take a break. Very good. It's my pleasure now to welcome to podium Mr. Clement Volo to present. Well, I think I recognize the colleagues from Saudi Arabia.
شكرا سيد نائب الرئيس. سوف تمارس بلادي حق الرد على بعض المغالطات والتناقضات الواضحة والادعاءات التي لا أساس لها من الصحة. وفي البداية لا نستغرب مواقف بعض الدول التي تدعي مراعاة.
Excuse me, my colleague. So if it's a right of reply, I can give you at the end. But if it's a point of order,
I would like to.
So right of reply I can give you at the end of the procedure. But if it's a point of order, so I can probably now. That's late for a point of order. Thank you. It's just my pleasure to welcome again Mr. Clement Velo to present his report. You have the floor, sir.
Monsieur le Vice-président, Excellences, chers collègues, 2020 marque le 10e anniversaire du mandat du rapporteur spécial sur les droits à la liberté de réunion pacifique et d'association. Au cours de cette décennie, de nombreuses réalisations ont été faites au prix de durs labeurs dans le domaine des droits de l'homme, de la paix et du développement. Des soulèvements en Tunisie aux révolutions populaires en Arménie, en Éthiopie et au Soudan, cette décennie a vu une montée des mouvements sociaux et des manifestations pacifiques qui ont conduit à d'importantes transitions démocratiques. Le monde a été témoin de la force croissante des organisations et des mouvements de femmes dans leur lutte pour l'égalité des sexes. Grâce à leur militantisme et à leur mobilisation, les femmes ont obtenu des résultats longtemps attendus en matière de protection des droits sexuels et reproductifs en Irlande, au Kenya, au Pakistan et au Chili, pour n'en citer que quelques-unes. Le mouvement Black Lives Matter nous a montré comment l'injustice dans une partie du monde et la mobilisation qui s'en est suivie peuvent déclencher des changements importants à l'échelle mondiale, suscitant des discussions sur le racisme, l'histoire, la violence et la discrimination au-delà des frontières. Il a montré le pouvoir de la manifestation et a déclenché des changements de politique importants et tardifs dans de nombreux endroits. Je pourrais poursuivre la liste de ces exemples qui sont nombreux. Ce qui est indéniable, c'est qu'au cours de la décennie, les droits de réunion et d'association ont été essentiels dans la lutte pour les droits de l'homme, en permettant aux gens de faire entendre leur voix, de faire progresser leurs droits, de partager des idées et de construire des partenariats pour créer un monde meilleur. Cependant, cette période n'a pas été facile. Au cours de cette décennie, la jouissance de ces libertés fondamentales a été confrontée à des défis énormes dans le monde entier. Les experts s'accordent à dire que cette décennie a connu l'attaque la plus complète et coordonnée contre ces libertés depuis la fin de la guerre froide. Cette tendance a été largement documentée par mon mandat. Au cours de ces 10 années, nous avons connu de nombreux revers, des violations flagrantes des droits de l'homme et des menaces